This story is called The Mitten, and I'm going to tell a version that was written by Alvin Tresselt. This story is about a boy named Nicky. That's short for Nicholas. He lives in Russia, and Nicky is very lucky because he lives not far from his grandmother Baba, which is Russian for grandmother. Now, every day after school, Nicky comes to Grandmother Baba's house and helps her with some chores. And in return, she helps him as well. Well, every year at the end of the summer, Nicky's grandmother Baba says, "Nicky, what color mittens would you like this winter?" Because, of course, last year's mittens are much too small for him by now. Well, Nicky will think, and then one year he said, "Well, I'd like green mittens." Another year he wanted purple mittens. But this year, Nicky said, "Grandmother Baba, I want a pair of white mittens." "Oh no, Nicky," said Grandmother Baba. "If I make you white mittens and one of them should fall off into the snow, how could you find it? It would be lost in all that white." "Oh no, Grandmother Baba, I could never lose one of your beautiful mittens. Please make me a white pair." "All right, Nicky, I will. But whenever you come in from outside, I will always do two things. First, I will look to see that you are safe and well. And then I will look to see if you have both your mittens." "Well, it's a deal," said Nicky. And that very night, Nicky's grandmother Baba got out her ball of white wool and her knitting needles, and click, 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 she knitted him a pair of beautiful white mittens. And it's a good thing she did, because that night it snowed. And so the next day, Nicky needed those new mittens. After school, he went running to Grandmother Baba's house. He had on his snowsuit and his boots and his new mittens. He went to the barn and got his sled, because one of the very important chores that Nicky did for Grandmother Baba was to keep the wood box full of sticks so that she could keep the fire burning in the wood stove where she cooked their meals. So Nicky pulled his sled out of the barn, and he began to walk across the new snow over Grandmother Baba's yard. And whenever he came to a place where a stick was sticking out of the snow, like a black skeleton hand, he would bend down and he would pick up the stick. I want you to pretend that you've got on Nicky's white mittens, and here's the stick. Pick it up. Whenever he found a stick, he would pick it up and put it on his sled, if it was a short stick. Now, if he pulled out a long stick, he would hold it in both hands. And then he would break it over his knee, crack, and he would put both pieces on his sled. And in this way, he would walk along collecting sticks, putting the short ones right on the sled, picking up the long ones and crack, breaking them over his knee. Well, pretty soon he had a nice little pile of sticks on his sled. And as he pulled the sled along, he was able to carry many more sticks than he could ever have carried in both of his hands or even in his arms. Well, he walked along and walked along, adding to that pile of sticks on his sled. He was working very hard, bending down and breaking the sticks and bending down again to put them on his sled. Now, he was very warmly dressed in his snowsuit, but I think that is why he was so warm that he didn't notice that the next time when he bent down to pick up a new stick, one of his mittens came loose and fell into the snow. And he was so warm and comfortable that he didn't even notice. He just went right on gathering sticks, leaving that mitten in the snow. Well, now Nicky didn't notice, but somebody else did. A snowshoe hare, a large, wild, white rabbit, came hopping over the snow. Now, a snowshoe hare has such fluffy, feathery feet that he can hop over the top of the snow and not fall into the snow and get stuck. Even though he was very cold, he went trotting along over the snow and he came to the Mitten. He thought, what a great, cozy place to spend the winter. A great big wild rabbit in Nicky's Mitten? Well, the rabbit was so cold that he gave it a try. He poked and he shoved and he pushed himself into that mitten, and Grandmother Baba's stitches were so strong that they stretched. Can you make them stretch? And they pulled, but they did not break. Well, the rabbit was very tightly wrapped in that mitten. Can you wrap your arms around yourself? That's a little bit how he felt. He was crowded, but he was warm, and he was happy. No sooner had he settled himself than down from a nearby tree flew an owl. "Hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo! Is that?" called the owl, and he landed right next to the Mitten. He turned his head and saw the rabbit. "Any room in there for me?" "Don't think so." "Oh, come on, move over." "Don't like the look of those sharp talons, those claws on the ends of your feet." "You better move over," said the owl. "Well, all right," said the rabbit. And the owl poked and pushed and shoved. "Hey, your feathers are tickling me. Move your wing. Well, you're stepping on my claws. Stop it. Ouch." Well, they wiggled and poked and shoved and finally got themselves settled. And now there were, count them with me, 2 animals in Nicky's Mitten. Well, they were crowded, but they were warm. Now, over the snow came a little animal called a hedgehog. Now, we don't have hedgehogs in Tennessee. We have porcupines, and they are much bigger and more dangerous. A porcupine has long, sharp quills that come out, and they can shoot them at their enemies. A hedgehog just has prickles, sort of bumpy spots on their body, sort of like a bumpy lizard. They don't really hurt very much at all. Well, the hedgehog is afraid of being eaten by just about anybody who might come along. And the hedgehog was walking along over the snow, muttering to herself, "Oh, woe is me, such a poor urchin. My nose is blue, my toes are cold. I sure wish I had a safe, cozy place to spend the boink." And the hedgehog ran right into Nicky's Mitten. She was so busy mumbling at herself that she didn't notice. But then she did. "Oh, excuse me, pardon me, friend, so sorry. Do not want to disturb, but say, that's a cozy spot. Any room for me?" "Oh, of course not," said the owl. "And look at you all over prickles. You'll prickle us. We don't want you in here. Oh, please help me." "Oh, look at the poor guy," said the owl. "His nose is blue. Let's move over." And so they did. And they wiggled and they poked and they shoved and they made room for that hedgehog. And they wiggled and shoved and got themselves sorted out. "Move your ears, will you? You're prickling me. Stop it. Get off of my paw. Ouch!" Well, they finally got settled. And no sooner had they gotten settled when out of the forest trotted a fox. Now the fox could see the warm breath of the animals in the Mitten rising up through the cold air. And he came running right to the Mitten. He sat down and snapped his long white teeth at those animals. "See, you've got a fancy, cozy spot for the winter. Move over then, won't you? Room for me, I'm sure." Well, the other animals were afraid not to do what the fox had asked, so they moved over. And the fox shoved and poked and pushed his way in. "Your fluffy tail is in my ear. Well, your foot is on my claw. Stop it. You're prickling me. Ouch!" It took quite a while for them to get settled. They were very crowded, but they were warm, and Grandmother Baba's stitches were so strong that they did not break. They stretched and they pulled, but they did not. And now there were 4 animals in Nikki's mitten. Well, out of a hole in a nearby tree scurried a tiny little mouse. The other animals saw her coming. They began to shake their heads and wave their wings and their paws. No room, no room. Oh, of course there's room. There's always room for one more. No, no room, no room, no room. Well, while the other animals were hollering at the little mouse, she just scurried right up into the mitten and sat herself right on the fox's long, orange, warm nose. And there she sat. And for just a moment, all 5 of those animals were crowded, but very cozy. And then the mouse's little claws began to tickle the fox's nose and chew! That fox sneezed, the animals went flying through the air, Nikki's mitten went flying through the air into the snow, just as out in the forest, Nikki noticed, oh my gosh, I've lost one of Grandmother Baba's mittens. I've got to go find it. Oh, she will be so upset with me. Nikki grabbed the handle of his sled, went running back along the path, came to Grandmother Baba's yard just in time to see a white shape floating against the beautiful blue Russian sky. And as he ran into Grandmother Baba's yard, he saw what it was. Lying there in the snow was his other mitten. But it looked so strange. Well, Nikki didn't know what had happened. He couldn't take time to try to think about it. He just grabbed that mitten up and ran back to Grandmother Baba's house, and sure enough, just like she said she would, there she was in the doorway. Well, Nikki, you're back. I can see that you're safe and well. Now show me your mittens. And Nikki held up both of his mittens. Nikki, what happened to that mitten? I don't know, Grandmother Baba. Well, Nikki certainly couldn't wear that mitten anymore. It was much too large. So that night, Grandmother Baba set right to work to make him another pair that would fit him. Grandmother Baba, I think I'd like a pair of red mittens. Could you put white snowflakes on them? Well, of course she could. And that very night she finished those beautiful new mittens, and Nikki wore them all the rest of that winter. They never did figure out what happened to that other white mitten. But we know, don't we? And that's the story of Nikki's mitten.